So a long time ago inside Raid Shadow Legends, back when I started playing, this would be probably about three and a half years ago now at this point, we actually had battle passes, not to be confused with the modern day Forge Pass where you're paying money just for some gear sets or the materials to create them, and then you're getting the RNG to actually craft them. None of that. We had a battle pass where you could progress and unlock, I believe it was like 5 or 7 different champions that you could actually review and see their kits prior to deciding if you wanted to spend on it or whatnot. I thought it was a very good way to actually monetize the game, because then you were guaranteeing players what they were going to get and what they could play with. And there were some decent champions included in that. So for example, Frozen Banshee actually came along with that battle pass. We had Whirlum Frost King, who's not incredibly good, even though he's been buffed a couple of times, but he was actually introduced in that pass as well. And then of course we have the topic of today's video, which if you've seen the thumbnail, you'll know who it is. That is going to be Stag, who is one of my favorite champions inside the game, even still, and probably one of my most used epics inside the game, even today in 2024. So what makes him so special? Well, let's go ahead and let's hop into his A1. He has an attack one enemy 2 times, each hit having a 50% chance of placing a decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. This is a very decent skill. You have a multi-hitter, you have a decreased speed on it, which is going to make it very useful for multiple areas in the game, such as Fire Knight, for example, which you'll see later on in the video. We have an AoE 95% chance of placing a decreased defense and decreased attack for 2 turns. This is a very interesting one. It is on a 3-turn cooldown, which is good, but this is one of the few champions that Raid decided to cuck, for lack of a better term, with a 95% land rate on their skill. So essentially you have to run the Sniper Mastery if you want to have him having a 100% chance of landing the decreased defense and decreased attack. Now he only has the 2 skills, so he's a very good candidate for something like a Reflex, or refresh accessories, those sorts of things. He does have a passive, which is placing an increased accuracy on an ally for 1 turn each time the ally has a debuff resisted by an enemy. You'll notice that this particular passive does not have a cooldown, and it also doesn't have a chance to place it, nothing like that, just straight up, here's a big version of an increased accuracy to help you place those debuffs next time, which is very nice, and I believe it can actually proc on himself as well if his decreased defense or decreased attack is resisted, in which case the next enemy he tries to place it on, there's going to be a lot better chance that he does place it. So if you're struggling to really meet certain accuracy thresholds or those sorts of things in certain dungeons, you can definitely get some use out of that as well. I know when I was initially progressing inside Spider, for example, I didn't have the accuracies that I needed on, say, for example, a Cold Heart, because I was trying to build her to survive. So having her try to place those heal reductions on the A1, having them resisted, she would then get the increased accuracy, so that when she came around to her A3, the decreased turn meter effect had a lot more chance of being landed successfully, which was quite nice. In terms of a blessing, what I have on him is Phantom Touch. I will go ahead and throw my infographic on screen here now for you guys to check out if you want to see what you should be building him with. Phantom Touch is a very good way to go. Cruelty, if you have him high awakened, of course. You can also get some use out of something like Nature's Wrath, which is going to increase the damage inflicted by him for each debuff he successfully places, which is quite nice. And of course, along that same line, you could also use him in something like a Heaven Cast, depending on where you're using him, and if you're looking for damage or if you're just looking for survivability out of this guy. In terms of stats, what are we rocking? We have 90,000 on the HP. I'll go ahead and show you Fire Knight's Castle since that's where I'll be using him. 92,000 HP, 2,600 defense, 283 speed, and 485 accuracy. I know these stats seem ridiculous. Keep in mind, this is a late game to early end game account, and I use this guy probably the most out of like a lot of the epics on my account. He is also +2 empowered, so he's getting a decent chunk of stats from that empowerment as well, which is quite nice, including some accuracy and resistances there, which are certainly useful. And then since he is an epic champion, I was actually able to complete the Faction Guardians as well, which helps him out quite a bit. Let's go ahead, let's take a look at the masteries. I do actually have him built inside War Master. I would not recommend building him inside War Master. It depends on your level of account though. If you need to, you can come down to Eagle Eye and get that extra 50 accuracy, which will roughly equate to being able to do 5 extra stages inside any given dungeon, which is quite nice, so it's a very impactful mastery. I have him built out in Spirit Haste, although he's generally not the last champion alive. So I would recommend instead going with Sniper, which is going to increase his chance of decreased defense and decreased attack to 100%, which is what you want. And it's also going to increase his chances of placing the decreased speed on the A1. That being said, once you're later game and you can reach those accuracy thresholds without an issue, you can feel free to run him in something like a War Master, like I do, of course, just to get that extra bit of damage out of him, just to help you get through those runs a little bit quicker. What do we have on him for gear? We're mainly just looking for accuracy and speed, as you might imagine, for your debuffer. At this point on my particular account, any sort of a debuffer champion that I have or a support champion, I'm generally looking for them to go faster than 250 speed as kind of like a baseline minimum, just because 250 is where a lot of my nukers are actually going to be, so I want them going faster than the nukes, obviously, so they can set them up, which just makes sense. Where do you use this guy? You can use him basically anywhere, so obviously a notable place to mention is the faction wars. If you're struggling with the banner lords, you can definitely get some use out of him here. If you are trying to progress inside Doom Tower, he can be a significant champion there as well. He can definitely help you climb those waves and progress. He's also very useful for some bosses, especially with his increased accuracy buff. So if you're having trouble going up against Bommel, for example, and you're trying to place freezes on him, or on the ads rather, even if you're just trying to place freezes inside Fire Knight hard, he can be very useful as well. He's also a very competent champion for Hydra, with his decreased speed, with his AoE decreased defense and attack. That's like 3 main roles that you're looking for. Granted, his decreased speed is not an AoE, but it does have a very decent land rate, so if it falls off somebody, if it gets cleansed, those sorts of things, he could be a good backup to help applicate it as well. City of Centranos, he is of course a very, very good champion. He does pop up in quite a few of these waves sometimes, and you'll see him in use against some of the bosses as well. So he's a very decent champion to have built out for this. I do believe there is actually a rotation where he shows up against the Iron Twins in here as well. I do use him fairly frequently against the Iron Twins myself. Having that decreased speed on the A1 essentially means you're going to be able to progress through the Iron Twins fortress, and they're not going to be able to get their turn meter filled whenever you receive a buff like they would if you had no decreased speed on them. So he's very useful there. I'm going to go ahead and show you a run with this particular team on the stage 20 of Fire Knight. So this team does have a few empowered epics, but they're not +4 6-star awakened or anything like that, which is quite nice. We do have a Cold Heart, Mithrala, and a Newt coming in, which are some very decent champions as well. This was a fusion, of course. You get Mithrala for free from doing the Hydra. You get Cold Heart by pulling enough Void Shards. For me, for at least, it took probably 2 years until I pulled my first Cold Heart. It was absolutely insane. Then, of course, you have Stag Knight and Ruella. Let's go ahead and hop into the run, and you can see how it works. Now, keep in mind as well, he's not built out inside the Sniper Mastery, so his chances of placing that aren't going to be 100%, but we will see it landing probably 9 times out of 10, roughly, or more specifically 9.5 times out of 10. It also does depend a little bit on your luck, though. It is worth noting, too, that Stag Knight can actually do decent damage if you haven't built out with damage stats. When I was really trying to get through Fire Knight, I did actually build him with a little bit of damage as well, just to help take down the boss quicker, to introduce less RNG to the run, which would be quite nice. You'll see that his decreased attack actually got resisted here, so he has the increased accuracy on himself as a result of that, which is quite cool. And I believe, and somebody's probably going to correct me in the comments on this if I'm wrong, but I believe he was one of the first increased accuracy champions in the game, although you couldn't really choose where it went, or you couldn't really choose when to place it. It was more so just predicated on, of course, failing to place a debuff, right? So still very cool that he was one of the first champions to do it, though. As you can see, we already got the shield down, and now with the combination of Cold Heart, Stag Knight, Ruella, and Newt doing their turn meter control as well as decreased speeds and all that sort of good stuff, the shield is not going back up. And in fact, the shield is not going back up because he is dead. So you can see, I just set a new personal best time for this. I had some RNG on my side. 1 minute and 9 seconds on Fire Knight stage 20 with 36 turns taken. This is not bad. Keep in mind as well, Stag Knight did 327,000 damage, which is fairly on par with the Cold Heart there as well, about half of her damage, right? So considering she's got those AoE on the A2, and then considering she also has the max HP nuke, that is pretty solid damage from Stag Knight. And my Newt, of course, did 1.6 million, but Newt could have also done more if he was built out a little bit better, so that might have taken some of the damage away from Stag Knight there. I hope this guide was helpful, though. Let me know down in the comments where you guys use Stag Knight, and if you got him from the Battle Pass, or if you pulled him at some point thereafter. I know I got him from the Battle Pass originally, but then it was probably about 1.5 years until I actually pulled a duplicate of him, which was insane. Made me very happy to actually have him from the pass, because I did actually spend on the pass back in the day. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.